was coming, you just didn't know that's what she was doing. Not in a confession, not in an argument that finally went too far, not in any moment that felt like a warning. She told you in the way she started answering questions, in the specific phrases that began appearing in her vocabulary like quiet smoke before a fire, in the sentences that sounded like normal relationship conversation but were actually something else entirely, a door being opened, a distance being measured, a decision being rehearsed before it was made. And now you're here either living in the aftermath or feeling the early tremors of something you can't quite name, wondering how you missed it.
You didn't miss it.
You just didn't know what you were hearing. Today, that changes. You're living inside a story that may have already changed its ending without telling you. There is a specific kind of pain that belongs to this particular situation, and it's unlike almost any other relational pain because of where it lives. It doesn't live in the chest the way grief does. It lives somewhere lower, somewhere more animal. In the stomach, in the hands, in the hypervigilance that makes you notice things you never noticed before, the angle of her phone, the timing of her responses, the quality of her presence when she's physically beside you. You're not paranoid. Paranoid people imagine threats that aren't there. What you're experiencing is something more honest than paranoia. It's a finely attuned human detection system registering a shift in someone whose patterns you know better than almost anyone on Earth. Something changed. The relationship that used to feel solid now has a slight give to it, like pressing on a floorboard and discovering the wood beneath isn't as sound as it looked. And the most difficult part of your situation is that you can't confront what you can't clearly name. You can't address a feeling. You can't build a conversation on instinct alone. You need language. You need to understand specifically what she's been saying, what those particular phrases actually mean beneath their surface so that you can respond to the reality of your situation rather than the performance of it. That's what this video gives you. Not a verdict, not an accusation, just clarity. And clarity, even when it's hard, is always the beginning of something better than confusion. Understanding why she speaks before she acts, before we name the specific phrases, you need to understand the psychology that produces them, because without this context, the phrases alone are just words. With it, they become a map. Women, broadly, psychologically, based on decades of relationship research, rarely make the decision to be unfaithful suddenly. It's almost never impulsive in the way it's sometimes portrayed. It's a gradual process, an emotional migration that happens in stages. And like any migration, it leaves tracks. The verbal track, the specific thing she starts. The saying before anything happens comes from a psychological process called pre-justification. Before a person crosses a line that violates their own values, their mind begins constructing the narrative that will make that crossing feel survivable, feel justified, feel like something that was done to her rather than something she chose. She's not necessarily conscious of this. The pre-justification process happens at a level beneath deliberate thought, but it expresses itself in language, in the specific phrases she starts using, in the way she begins framing the relationship herself and you in the days and weeks before anything changes. Learning to recognize these phrases is not about becoming suspicious of every word she says. It's about understanding the psychological signature of a specific process so you can recognize it if it's happening and respond to it while there's still something to respond to. I just feel like we've grown apart. This is often the first phrase, but taken alone, it sounds like a legitimate relationship concern. Because sometimes people do grow apart. Sometimes this sentence is simply true and needs to be addressed. But in the specific context we're discussing, this phrase serves a particular function. It establishes distance as an existing reality rather than as something that happened or is being created. It frames the disconnection as something that occurred organically, something nobody is responsible for, rather than something with a cause and a potential remedy. When this phrase appears without a specific complaint attached to it, without because you've been doing this, or because I've been feeling that, pay attention to what's missing, the vagueness is the tell because genuine relationship drift has specific expressions. It sounds like particular grievances, particular needs unmet, particular moments where the distance became visible. We've grown apart, delivered as a complete sentence with no elaboration, but offered is often not an observation. It's the beginning of a narrative, one that positions the relationship as already over, in some essential way clearing the emotional ground for what she's moving toward. If you hear this, don't respond defensively. Respond with curiosity. Ask her to be specific. Her response to that invitation will tell you whether you're dealing with a real relationship problem that can be worked on or a prepared position. I've been feeling really lonely lately. Loneliness in a relationship is real. It's one of the most painful experiences a person can have to be with someone and still feel fundamentally unseen. If she expresses loneliness, it deserves to be taken seriously. But there are two very different versions of this statement, and learning to distinguish them matters enormously. The first version comes with eye contact, with a quality of vulnerability that's asking for something for you to move toward her, to hear her, to respond. This version is reaching for you even as it describes the distance. It's an invitation to repair. The second version has a slightly different texture. It's delivered with a flatness that isn't asking for anything. Or it's said almost as information, something she's noting rather than something she's hoping you'll fix. There's a resignation in it rather than a plea, like she's reporting on a state of affairs that has already been processed and partially accepted. The second version is the one that should catch your attention, because loneliness that has already been accepted rather than loneliness that is still reaching for you to close the gap is loneliness that has potentially already found another direction to move in. Again, don't respond with defensiveness. Respond with presence. Move toward her, but watch whether moving toward her creates warmth or produces discomfort. Her reaction to your genuine effort will tell you where things actually stand. You never really understood. But me, this phrase lands hard. It's designed to, and the reason it lands hard is that it contains just enough truth in most relationships to be undeniable, which makes it devastating and extremely difficult to respond to. But here's the psychological function it serves in the specific context we're discussing. When a woman has formed a meaningful connection with someone outside her relationship, whether emotional, physical, or both, that person represents something specific to her. Someone who gets her. Someone who listens differently. Someone in whose presence she feels seen in a way the relationship may have stopped providing. And in order to justify the significance of that outside connection, in order to make sense of why she's drawn to it, she needs to establish that the primary relationship was fundamentally lacking in the same area. Hence, you never really understood me? Notice the word never. Not lately or when I try to talk about certain things. Never. It's a retroactive rewriting of the entire relationship's emotional history. And retroactive rewrites of relationship history are almost always serving a current need, the need to justify something that is already happening or very close to happening. If this phrase appears particularly alongside other phrases we're discussing, treat it as significant. And respond not by defending your track record, but by genuinely asking, what would understanding you look like right now? What do you need me to? But here. Her response will reveal whether she's still in the relationship enough to answer you or whether she's already somewhere else. 5. I need to find myself again. Personal growth and self-discovery are legitimate human needs. This phrase, in a different context, can mean exactly what it says. But in the context we're examining, it performs a specific function. It reframes withdrawal from the relationship as an internal journey rather than an external movement. It makes her migration about her rather than about the destination she's migrating toward. Finding herself covers a multitude of behavioral changes that would otherwise require explanation. New social circles, unexplained time, reduced investment in shared life, increased privacy. All of these can be housed under the umbrella of working on myself in a way that makes questioning them feel unsupportive. The tell is in what the finding herself looks like in practice. Genuine self-discovery tends to produce someone who is more open, more integrated, more willing to share what she's discovering. It makes a person more present in their life, not less. When finding herself looks like closing off, increasing secrecy, and reducing investment in the shared future, the finding is not happening internally. It's happening in a specific external direction that the phrase is designed to obscure. I'm not sure what I want anymore. List because it can be completely genuine. Uncertainty is real. People do go through periods of not knowing what they want. But this phrase, in the specific context of an otherwise functioning relationship, arrives with a particular timing. It tends to appear after something has already shifted in her emotional landscape, not before. It's not the beginning of confusion. It's the verbal expression of a confusion that already has a secret answer she's not ready to voice. I'm not sure what I want, but anymore, is often the bridge between the old story and the new one. It creates space. It holds the relationship in suspension without officially ending. It buys time for something to develop elsewhere while maintaining the primary relationship as a fallback position. If you hear this phrase, the question to bring to it gently, genuinely, without accusation is, what would help you figure it out? What do you feel is missing? Her answer, or her inability to answer, will tell you whether. But genuine confusion or managed confusion. 7. The phrase that isn't words at all, there is a sixth thing she says before she cheats, and it has no words. It's the conversation she stops having with you. The unshared thought you can almost see passing across her face before she decides not to say it. The story from her day that doesn't come out. The question she used to ask that no longer appears. The opinion she's stopped offering. The laughter that has become more managed, but less real. Silence, specific, new, pattern-breaking silence is the most honest thing she says in this entire period. Because the conversations she's no longer having with you are happening somewhere. The thoughts she's not sharing with you are being shared somewhere. The version of herself she's keeping private is being given to someone. The absence of what used to be there is itself a presence. And learning to notice what's missing is as important as learning to hear what's being said. 8. But to do with this knowledge right now, here is where most content on this topic fails the person watching it. It hands you the recognition without the direction. So let me be very direct. If you're hearing these phrases, if 2 or 3 of them are running simultaneously in your relationship right now, the worst thing you can do is nothing. The second worst thing you can do is confront her with surveillance, accusations built on evidence gathering, or anger that closes every door to honest. But conversation, the only thing that has a genuine chance of changing the trajectory, if there's still time to change it, is radical honesty delivered from a place of love rather than fear. Not, I know what you're doing, but I can feel something shifting between us and I love you too much to pretend I don't. I need us to be completely honest with each other about where we are, not where we're supposed to be, where we actually are. That kind of conversation, vulnerable, direct, free of accusation, is the only one that can meet her wherever she actually is. And her response to it will tell you everything you need to know about whether you're dealing with something that can still be saved or something that has already made its decision. Either way, you deserve to know the truth. And you deserve to stop living in the limbo of sensing something you can't yet name. The hardest truth of all before we close, something needs to be said that doesn't get said enough in conversations like this one. If she's already there, if the decision has already been made and is already being acted on, it is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of her choices, and her choices, however painful they are for you to reckon with, are ultimately not something you could have controlled by being different enough or better enough or more enough. You are not responsible for another person's integrity. You are only responsible for your own. And whatever the truth turns out to be, whatever the outcome of the honest conversation you're going to have, you are going to be okay. Not immediately. Not without pain, but genuinely, durably okay. Because people who are committed to living in truth, however hard it is, always find their way to ground that can actually hold them. You are one of those people. That's why you're here. She may have been saying it in a language you hadn't learned yet. Now you have. The phrases, the silences, the psychological process. But underneath all of it, you understand now what was happening and why. And that understanding, however it sits with you in this moment, gives you something you didn't have before. The ability to respond to what's real rather than what's comfortable. The ability to have the conversation that actually matters instead of dancing around it. The ability to make decisions about your own life from a place of clarity rather than confusion. That is not a small thing. That is everything. If this video gave you something you genuinely needed today, if it named something that's been living in you without a name, subscribe. Every week on this channel, we have the honest, unflinching, deeply human conversations about love, trust, betrayal, and healing that most people are too afraid to start. You're not alone in what you're carrying, and you don't have to carry it in the dark.